The day humanity was cast out from the galaxy, the stars themselves seemed to weep. Admiral Park stood alone on the observation deck of the colony's ship Dawn of Hope. His hands were clasped behind his back, his face carved from stone. Through the massive window, he watched Earth grow smaller and smaller until it became nothing more than a tiny blue dot lost among millions of stars. Behind him, 46 other ships followed in tight formation. They carried everything that remained of the human race. 8 million souls, 8 million hearts filled with fear, anger, and a pain so deep that words could not describe it. The Galactic Conquered had spoken. 12 ancient species, each 1 millions of years old, had gathered in their great hall and passed judgment on humanity. The crime was simple. Humans evolved too fast. They learned too quickly. They asked questions that made the elder races uncomfortable. In just 10,000 years, humanity had gone from caves to starships. The Conquered found this terrifying. They breed like insects, the speaker had said during the trial. They adapt like viruses. Give them another 1,000 years and they will challenge us all. Then let us not give them that chance, the speaker had replied. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would be exiled, not to some distant corner of the galaxy where they might rebuild and return. No, they would be sent into the void between galaxies, into the endless darkness where no star shone, where no planet offered shelter, where no species had ever survived. It was a death sentence dressed in the clothes of mercy. Remembered the moment he received the news. He had been a young captain then, commanding a small patrol vessel near the outer colonies. When the transmission came through, he had stared at his screen for a full minute without moving. Then he had closed his eyes and made a promise to himself. They would not die. Whatever it took, however long it required, humanity would survive. And one day they would return. Now, 15 years later, he commanded the entire Exodus fleet. The burden of 8 million lives rested on his shoulders like a mountain made of iron. The door behind him slid open. Lieutenant stepped onto the observation deck, her boots clicking against the metal floor. She was young, barely 30, but her eyes held the same hard determination that burned in every human who had lived through the exile. "Admiral," she said, her voice tight, "the escort is signaling. We are approaching the boundary markers." Did not turn around. "How many ships are watching us leave?" 47 dreadnoughts, sir. They have their weapons powered and ready." A bitter smile crossed the Admiral's face. Even now, at the moment of their greatest cruelty, the Conquered feared humanity. They sent nearly 50 warships to escort 8 million refugees into oblivion. What did they think the humans would do? Fight back with colony ships and cargo vessels? "Let them watch," said quietly. "Let them remember this moment, because they will hear stories about this day and they will wonder why their ancestors were so afraid of us." Moved to stand beside him. Together, they watched as the last familiar stars began to fade. Ahead of them lay nothing, a great emptiness that stretched for millions of light years. No maps existed for where they were going. No probe had ever returned from the intergalactic void. "Sir," said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "do you really believe we can survive out there?" Finally turned to look at her. His eyes were old beyond his years, filled with grief and rage and something else, something that looked almost like hope. "Lieutenant, do you know why the Conquered truly fears us?" Shook her head. "It is not because we evolve quickly or because we breed fast. They have encountered other species that did the same. They simply wiped them out before they became a threat," turned back to the window. "They fear us because we refuse to accept the impossible. Every other species in this galaxy looks at a problem and asks if it can be solved. Humans look at a problem and ask how it will be solved. We do not accept defeat. We do not know how to stop fighting." He placed his hand against the cold glass of the window. "They are sending us into the void because they believe nothing can survive there, but they have forgotten something important. Every time someone told humanity that something was impossible, we proved them wrong. We were told we could never leave our planet. We left it. We were told we could never travel faster than light. We found a way. We were told we would never stand among the stars as equals, and for a brief moment we did. His hand clenched into a fist. The void will try to kill us. The cold will try to freeze us. The emptiness will try to drive us mad, and we will survive all of it, because that is what humans do. We survive. We adapt. We overcome. The ship shuddered slightly as it crossed the boundary markers. Watched the dreadnoughts peel away one by one, their captains probably celebrating the end of the human problem. In a few hours, reports would reach the conquered. There would be festivals and celebrations. The elder races would toast their wisdom and foresight. Let them celebrate, thought. Let them drink and laugh and forget about us. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice would reach every ship, every compartment, every frightened soul huddled in the darkness of the Exodus fleet. This is Admiral Park. As of this moment, we have left the galaxy that was once our home. The conquered believes they have killed us. They think that by casting us into darkness, they have solved their human problem. He paused, letting the words sink in. They are wrong. They have not killed us. They have freed us. In the galaxy we left behind, we were limited by their rules, their laws, their fear. Out here, we have no limits. Out here, we answer to no one but ourselves. Out here, we will become something they cannot imagine. His voice grew harder, each word cutting like a blade. To every child listening to my voice, remember this day. Tell your children about it. Tell every generation that comes after. We were betrayed by those who should have welcomed us as brothers. We were cast out by cowards who feared our potential, and we will make them regret that choice for the rest of eternity. He took a deep breath. The journey ahead will be hard. Many of us will not live to see its end, but our children will, and their children after them. And one day, when the conquered has grown soft and lazy, when they have forgotten the species they tried to murder, our descendants will return. They will not come as beggars asking for scraps. They will not come as refugees seeking shelter. They will come as conquerors, with a fleet so vast it will darken the stars themselves. Across 47 ships, 8 million humans listened in silence. Some wept, some prayed, but all of them felt something stir in their hearts, a fire that the conquered had tried to extinguish but had only made stronger. This is not the end of humanity, concluded. This is the beginning. The galaxy threw us into the void. We will return with an army. I swear this on my life, on my blood, and on the memory of every human who ever lived and died under Earth's blue sky. We will return. He ended the transmission and stood in silence as the last light of the Milky Way faded behind them. The darkness of the void welcomed humanity like an old friend. And somewhere deep in that darkness, something ancient stirred, as if awakened by the arrival of a species that refused to die. 50 years in the void nearly broke humanity. The first generation of exiles died with grief in their hearts, dreaming of blue skies they would never see again. The second generation grew up angry, raised on stories of betrayal and promises of revenge. By the time Commander Sara took command of the fleet, humanity had been reduced to 31 ships and 4 million souls. Sara was born in the recycled air of a generation ship. She had never seen a planet, never felt real wind on her face, never looked up at a sun. Her entire world was metal corridors, artificial light, and the endless humming of machines that kept her people alive. But she had inherited something from her grandmother, one of the original exiles. She had inherited the fire. "We are dying slowly," she told the Council of Captains on the day she took command. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with intensity. "Our ships are falling apart. Our people are losing hope. Every year, we lose another vessel to mechanical failure or despair. If we continue like this, we will be extinct within a century." The captains shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They knew she spoke the truth. They had simply been afraid to face it. "So we change," Sora continued. We stop trying to survive and start trying to thrive. We stop looking backward at what we lost and start looking forward at what we can become. Captain O, the fleet's chief scientist, leaned forward. She was old, her hair white and her hands wrinkled, but her mind remained sharp as a blade. Commander, with respect, we have been trying to improve our situation for 50 years. We simply do not have the resources. Then we find resources. Sora pulled up a holographic map of the void. It showed nothing but emptiness for millions of light years in every direction. The Conquered told us nothing exists out here, but the Conquered also told us humans were inferior. They have been wrong before. They could be wrong again. The search began immediately. For 20 years, Sora pushed the fleet deeper into the void. Ships spread out in search patterns, scanning for anything that might help them survive. Most found nothing. The void was as empty as the Conquered had promised. But Sora refused to give up. She sent probe after probe into the darkness, each one traveling further than the last. Most never returned, but one did. The message it carried changed everything. Commander, a young officer named Lee said, his voice shaking with excitement. You need to see this. Sora rushed to the sensor station and looked at the readings. Her heart stopped. Floating in the void, impossibly far from any galaxy, was a structure. It was massive beyond comprehension, larger than any space station humanity had ever built. And it was old. Millions of years old, perhaps billions. What is it? Sora whispered. We do not know, replied, but it is still powered. After all this time, something is still running inside. The fleet changed course immediately. It took them 5 years to reach the structure. When they finally arrived, every human in the fleet pressed against windows and screens to see it. The thing they would later call the first forge hung in the void like a sleeping giant. Its surface was covered in symbols that hurt the eyes to look at. Its dimensions seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of observation. Sora led the first exploration team personally. Inside, they found technology so advanced it made human science look like children playing with toys. Machines that could reshape matter at the atomic level. Power generators that drew energy from dimensions humanity did not know existed. Weapons that could crack planets like eggs. But more importantly, they found answers. The forge had been built by a species so ancient that even the elder races of the Conquered had no memory of them. These builders, as humanity came to call them, had ruled the universe when the first stars were still being born. They had created wonders beyond imagination. And then, something had destroyed them. The records were fragmented, but the message was clear. Something lived in the void between galaxies. Something hungry. Something old. The builders had fought against it and lost. The forges were their last gift to any species that might come after, a weapon against the darkness. Dr. O, despite her age, worked tirelessly to understand the technology. This is not just a discovery, she told Sora one night, her eyes red from lack of sleep. This is evolution. With this technology, we can become something entirely new. Sora nodded slowly, then let us begin. The transformation took generations. Humanity spread through the void, finding more forges, more relics, more pieces of the puzzle. Each discovery made them stronger. Each secret they unlocked pushed them further beyond what they had been. Children were born with genetic modifications that made them smarter, stronger, more adaptable than any human before. Ships were rebuilt using builder technology, becoming things of terrible beauty. Weapons were forged that could challenge gods. By the time Commander Sora died at the age of 112, humanity had changed beyond recognition. Her great-great-grandson, Captain, stood at her deathbed holding her withered hand. She looked up at him with eyes that had seen humanity's darkest hour and its dawn. "Is it ready?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Nodded. "The fleet is complete, 10,000 warships, 50 million citizens, we are ready." A smile crossed Sora's ancient face. "Then go home, child. Go home and show them what we have become." She closed her eyes and let out one final breath. Stood in silence for a long moment, tears streaming down his face. Then he straightened his shoulders and walked out of the medical bay. There was work to be done. The Cathedral of Stars had been built around a captured neutron star. It served as the capital of the Terran Ascendancy, the new name humanity had given itself. Inside its vast halls gathered every fleet commander, every captain, every leader who would sail with them back to the galaxy. 300 years ago, our ancestors were cast into darkness, he said. His voice echoed through the chamber, carrying the weight of generations. The conquered expected us to die. Instead, we found the gifts of the builders. We found power they cannot imagine. We found purpose. He activated a holographic display showing the fleet in all its terrible glory. Ships that looked like predators made of living metal. Carriers that could launch thousands of fighters. And at the center, the eternal dawn, large enough to be seen from orbit around any planet. Our ancestors made a promise. They swore that one day we would return, that we would show the conquered what they created when they cast us out. Eyes swept across the assembled commanders. The time has come to keep that promise. The cheers that followed shook the station to its foundations. 3 days later, the fleet departed. 10,000 warships, carrying the hopes and dreams of 50 million humans, turned toward the distant glow of the Milky Way. Behind them, they left the void that had been their prison and their forge. Ahead of them lay the galaxy that had tried to kill them. Stood on the bridge of the eternal dawn, watching the stars grow brighter as they approached home. "We are coming," he said quietly to no one. "We are coming, and nothing in this universe will stop us." The void had been meant as a grave. Humanity had made it a cradle for gods. Officer had watched the galactic rim for 600 years. They were a long-lived species, their bodies capable of surviving for. This made them excellent border guards. They had patience that younger races could not match, had spent centuries staring at the same empty patch of space, waiting for threats that never came. Nothing ever emerged from the void between galaxies. Nothing could survive out there. Every scientist in the Conquered agreed on this simple fact. The intergalactic darkness was death itself, cold and empty and absolute. So when her sensors began screaming warnings on an ordinary morning, assumed the equipment had finally broken. She had been complaining about outdated systems for decades. Now she would have proof that the station needed upgrades. Then she looked at the readings more carefully. Her blood turned to ice. 10,000 ships were emerging from the void. Hands trembled as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. The vessels were massive, each one built from materials her sensors could not identify. Energy signatures pulsed through them in patterns that seemed almost alive, and they were moving toward conquered space with clear purpose. She activated the emergency communication system and sent a priority alert to command. Then she opened a channel to the approaching fleet, hoping desperately that this was some kind of mistake. "Unknown vessels," she transmitted, her voice shaking. "You are approaching conquered space without authorization. Identify yourselves immediately." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a voice answered. It spoke perfect Conquered Standard, the common language used by all member species, but there was something in its tone that made one hide. "Station, this is Fleet Admiral Jinnah of the Terran Ascendancy. We request passage to present ourselves before the Galactic Conquered. You have 1 hour to respond." His mind went blank. Terran, the old word for humans, but that was impossible. The humans had been exiled 300 years ago. They had been sent into the void to die. Every report confirmed they had perished within the first century. There was no way they could still exist. She forced herself to speak. "Terran vessel, the Conquered does not recognize your authority. You were sentenced to." "We were sentenced to die." The human voice cut through like a blade made of winter. As you can see, we declined. Now, you may grant us passage or we will create our own. Choose quickly. Looked at her tactical display. The human fleet was arranged in a perfect formation, 10,000 ships moving as one. At the center floated something that made her heart stop beating. A vessel the size of a small moon, covered in weapons she could not identify. She had no choice. "Passage granted," she whispered. "Please proceed." News of humanity's return spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. The conquered called emergency sessions. Ancient treaties were studied. Military forces were put on high alert. For 300 years, the elder races had slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that the human threat had been eliminated. Now they were waking up to a nightmare. Admiral Jinnah led the fleet through conquered space without stopping. Every station they passed sent warnings and demands. Every military force that approached quickly changed its mind when it saw what it was facing. The humans did not fire a single shot. They did not need to. Their presence alone was enough. The journey to Harmony Prime, the Conquered's capital world, took 2 weeks. When the human fleet finally arrived, it found a welcome committee of 300 warships from every elder species. They surrounded the planet in a defensive formation, weapons charged and ready. Stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn and studied the opposing force. Her face showed no expression. "Admiral," said her second-in-command, Captain Han, "they are demanding we stand down and submit to inspection." Almost smiled. Almost. How many of our ships would it take to destroy their entire fleet? Checked his calculations. 17, Admiral, perhaps fewer. Send them our response. We will meet with the conquered speakers as requested. We will not submit to inspection. If they attempt to board any of our vessels, we will consider it an act of war. The message was sent. The conquered ships did not move. 3 hours later, Admiral Jinnah walked into the grand chamber of the Galactic Conquered. She wore a uniform made from materials that did not exist in conquered science. Behind her walked 12 soldiers in powered armor that hummed with barely controlled energy. Every step they took left faint marks on the ancient stone floor. The 12 speakers of the elder species sat in their ancestral positions, arranged in a half-circle of elevated seats. They had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. They had decided the fate of countless species. They had sent humanity into the void to die. Now they watched the humans approach with expressions that ranged from fear to disbelief to barely hidden terror. Speaker of the spoke first. His voice carried a tremor he could not hide. "The exile species returns. This is unexpected." Stopped in the center of the chamber and looked up at the assembled speakers. She was a small woman by human standards, slim and haired, but something in her eyes made even the most ancient beings present feel like children. "Is it?" she asked. "You sentenced us to death and called it mercy. You threw us into the darkness between stars and expected us to vanish. Did you truly believe we would simply accept extinction?" "The Conquered's decision was made according to proper procedure," another speaker insisted. His voice was high and thin, like wind through broken glass. "You were deemed a threat to galactic stability." "And what are we now?" asked softly. No one answered. The Admiral let the silence stretch. She wanted them to feel it. She wanted them to understand exactly how much the universe had changed while they slept. "We did not return for revenge," she finally said. Several speakers showed visible relief. "Revenge would be wasteful, and we have learned not to waste anything. The void taught us that. Every breath, every drop of water, every scrap of metal had value. We learned to be efficient." She began walking slowly along the edge of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the silence. "We returned for 2 reasons. First, to show you what we have become. You cast out children because you feared what they might grow into. Look at us now, speakers. Look at what your fear created." She activated a holographic display. Star charts appeared in the air, but not of conquered space. These maps showed the void between galaxies, and within it, a civilization that dwarfed anything the elder species had ever built. Cities floating in empty space, shipyards that could produce fleets in months, a population of 50 million humans who had never known anything but the darkness. While you stagnated, we grew. While you rested on ancient achievements, we innovated. While you looked inward, we explored horizons you could not imagine. His voice grew cold. We no longer need your approval. We no longer seek your acceptance. We have built our own empire in the grave you dug for us. Speaker leaned forward. Then why return at all? If you are so powerful, if you need nothing from us, why are you here? Turned to face him directly. Her eyes held something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. That brings me to my second reason, a warning. The holographic display changed. Now it showed something else. Shapes moving in the darkness between galaxies. Shapes that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. Shapes that made even the enhanced humans in escort shift uncomfortably. The universe is not as empty as you believed, said. Things live in the void. Things that are older than your species, older than this galaxy, perhaps older than the stars themselves. They are waking up. They are hungry, and they are coming. The chamber fell completely silent. We have seen them, continued. We have fought them. We know what they are capable of. And we know that when they arrive, they will not distinguish between human and between exile and elder. They will consume everything. She deactivated the display and faced the speakers one final time. We will stand against them. The question you must answer, speakers, is simple. Will you stand with us, or will you be swept aside? The Grand Chamber remained silent long after Admiral Jinnah departed. The elder species had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. They had never faced a choice like this before. And deep in the void they had ignored for so long, something ancient began to stir. The weeks following humanity's return were chaos. The galactic conquered had maintained order for millions of years through a simple principle. The elder species knew best. Younger civilizations were expected to follow their guidance without question. This system had worked because no one had ever successfully challenged it. Now humanity had returned from the dead with a fleet that could destroy the combined military forces of every elder species. The system was breaking apart. Emergency sessions were held every day. Speakers argued and accused each other. Some demanded immediate war against the humans, as if 300 years in the void had not taught them anything. Others insisted the humans were lying about the threat from the darkness. A few even suggested begging humanity for forgiveness. Representative watched these debates with growing frustration. She was humanity's chief diplomat to the conquered, a position that required patience she did not naturally possess. Every day she sat in the observation gallery, listening to alien species argue about what to do with her people. Every day she bit her tongue and reminded herself that shooting the speakers would not help the situation. On the 43rd day, her patience finally ran out. The speaker was in the middle of yet another speech claiming that humanity had stolen its technology from some unknown source. No species could advance so far in merely 3 centuries, he declared, his crystalline body pulsing with self-righteous light. Their power must be an illusion, or they must have cheated somehow. Stood up without being recognized. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. Speaker, she said, her voice calm but carrying a dangerous edge. You have spent 43 days questioning whether our technology is real. Perhaps a demonstration would settle the matter. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small cube, no larger than her fist. She placed it on the floor of the gallery and stepped back. At her command, the cube unfolded. Metal pieces rearranged themselves in ways that should have been impossible. Within seconds, the cube had become a repair drone, hovering silently in the air. Pointed at the far wall of the chamber, where a crack had been spreading through the ancient stone for centuries. Every repair crew in the Concord had declared it unfixable. The damage was too deep, the stone too old, the structural problems too complex. The drone flew to the wall and began working. 30 seconds later, the crack was gone. The stone looked as if it had been laid yesterday. 800 years of damage, repaired in less time than it took to pour a cup of tea. The chamber fell silent, looked up at the speakers with eyes that held no warmth. "We do not exaggerate," she said. "We do not steal. We do not cheat. We simply no longer operate by your limitations. Accept this or do not. But stop wasting our time with your denial." The true reckoning came 3 days later. At Admiral's request, the Terran Ascendancy opened its historical archives to the entire galaxy. Every recording, every document, every testimony from the original exile was made public. What the archives contained shocked billions. The Concord had taught its citizens that humanity was exiled because they were dangerous criminals who threatened galactic peace. Children across 1,000 worlds grew up learning that humans were monsters who needed to be stopped before they destroyed everything. The truth was uglier. The archives showed the original trial in full. They showed the human representatives begging for understanding, promising to slow their development, offering to limit their population growth. They showed the elder species laughing at these requests. They showed Speaker's grandfather calling humanity a disease that must be cut out before it spreads. They showed the exile fleet departing, 47 ships carrying 8 million terrified civilians, including over 1 million children. They showed Bobbies crying as their parents tried to explain why they had to leave their homes forever. They showed old people weeping for the planet they would never see again. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. On hundreds of worlds, citizens demanded answers from their governments. How could the Conquered have done this? How could they have sentenced children to die in the void and called it justice? The carefully constructed story of human evil collapsed overnight. Ambassador delivered humanity's official response in an address broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. He was an old man, white-haired and soft-spoken, but his words carried the weight of 300 years of pain. He stood before the Conquered assembly with no notes, no prepared speech. He simply spoke from the heart. "You cast out children," he said, "because you feared what they might become. Your ancestors looked at humanity and saw potential. Instead of nurturing that potential, instead of guiding us, instead of welcoming us as partners, they chose murder. They dressed it up in fancy words like exile and mercy, but make no mistake, they intended for us to die." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And here is the truth the Conquered does not want you to know. We almost did die. For the first 50 years, we lost ship after ship. Parents buried their children. Children buried their parents. We ate recycled food and breathed recycled air and slowly went mad from the endless darkness." His voice grew harder. "But we survived, not because of luck or fate or divine intervention. We survived because that is what humans do. You cannot kill hope in us. You cannot destroy our will to live. The void tried to break us for 300 years, and all it did was make us stronger." Looked directly at the speakers. His eyes filled with something that was almost pity. "You created exactly what you feared. A humanity that no longer needs to compete with you. A humanity that has evolved beyond your limitations. A humanity that will outlast every species in this chamber by millions of years." He shook his head slowly. "And now you must decide whether that humanity will be your ally or your enemy." The younger species of the Conquered made their choice first. They had joined the Alliance after humanity's exile. They had no part in that crime. Many of them had been treated poorly by the elder species themselves, forced to accept inferior status in exchange for protection. When they looked at the returned humans, they saw something that gave them hope. If humanity could survive the void, if they could rise from exile to become this powerful, then perhaps the old order was not as permanent as it seemed. One by one, the younger species approached the human delegation. They offered trade agreements, cultural exchanges, military partnerships. Within weeks, humanity had more allies in the galaxy than it had ever possessed before the exile. The elder species were more divided. They retreated into isolation, their pride unable to accept what they had done. They fractured into factions, some wanting peace and others wanting war. Two of the smaller elder species chose to oppose humanity entirely, gathering their fleets and threatening violence. Those fleets disappeared 3 days later. No one saw what happened. No battle was fought. The ships simply vanished along with every being aboard them. When they demanded an explanation, Admiral replied with a single sentence: they were warned. After that, no more elder species threatened violence. The newly formed coalition met for the first time in a chamber built specifically for the occasion. Representatives from 37 species sat together, humans and their new allies, bound by necessity and cautious hope. Admiral Jinnah stood before them, her uniform carrying the weight of generations. For 300 years, she said, humanity survived alone. We learned that no one would save us. That lesson made us strong, but it also made us cold, perhaps too cold. She looked at the alien representatives who had chosen to stand with her people. Some were species that had existed for millions of years. Others were younger than humanity itself. All of them had taken a risk by coming here. Today we learn a different lesson. That strength shared is strength. That former enemies can become allies. That the universe, for all its cruelty, still holds the capacity for change. Her expression hardened, and the chamber seemed to grow colder. And we will need every bit of that strength, because the darkness we found in the void is not content to remain there. It is waking. It is hungry. And when it comes, it will not care about treaties or borders or ancient grudges. She activated a display showing the latest sensor readings from the edge of the galaxy. Shadows were moving in the void, coming closer every day. They are called the Devourers, said. We do not know where they came from or what they truly are. We only know that they destroyed the civilization that built the technology we now use. They have been sleeping for millions of years, but they are waking up, and they are coming for us all. The chamber fell silent as the weight of her words settled over every representative. This is why we returned, continued. Not for revenge, not for recognition. We returned because humanity alone cannot stop what is coming. We need allies. We need partners. We need every ship, every weapon, every brave soul who is willing to stand against the darkness. She straightened her shoulders and looked at each representative in turn. Will you stand with us? One by one they answered. And in the void between galaxies, the Devourers opened their eyes. The Devourers came without warning. 1 year after humanity's return, the edge of the galaxy erupted in darkness. Sensors across 17 systems went blind at the same moment. Ships stationed at border outposts screamed distress calls that cut off mid-sentence. Within hours, the first images reached the Coalition Command Center. Commander Nam stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn and watched the nightmare unfold. The Devourers were not ships in any normal sense. They were something between energy and matter, darkness given form and hunger. Where they passed, nothing remained. Not wreckage, not debris, not even atoms. They consumed everything they touched and grew larger with each meal. Contact on 17 fronts, reported a young officer, his voice cracking with fear. They are coming through everywhere at once. Admiral stood at the tactical display, her face carved from stone. She had prepared for this moment her entire life. Her ancestors had prepared for it. 300 years of survival in the void had led to this single battle. All Terran vessels, engage formation Exodus 7, she commanded. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. Show them what the void taught us. The human fleet moved as one. 10,000 warships, each one a masterpiece of combined human and builder technology, spread across the battle lines like a wave of silver fire. They had trained for this in the darkness between galaxies, fighting simulated enemies that were designed to be worse than anything real. Now they would discover if their preparation was enough. The first engagement happened near a gas giant called Velar's Eye. A devourer tendril, miles long and pulsing with stolen energy, reached for a civilian transport trying to flee the system. The transport carried 12,000 refugees, mostly children and elderly. They had seconds to live. Captain Park of the destroyer Angry Dawn made a choice that required no thought. He drove his ship directly into the tendril's path. The collision was catastrophic. The Angry Dawn was swallowed instantly, its hull crumpling like paper in a fist. But as it died, the ship's weapons fired one final volley, builder-designed missiles that carried payloads of compressed antimatter wrapped in quantum fields. The tendril screamed. For the first time in millions of years, a devourer felt pain. Across the battle lines, human ships pressed the attack. They died by the hundreds, then by the thousands. Each death bought time for civilian evacuations. Each sacrifice weakened the enemy by fractions. The conquered fleets, ancient and proud, crumbled on first contact. Ships that had enforced galactic law for eons were swallowed in seconds. Species that had never known true fear learned it intimately. The elder races fled toward there, abandoning outer colonies to their fate. But the coalition held. The younger species, fighting alongside humanity, discovered something remarkable. Human tactics worked. The strategies developed in 3 centuries of void survival, the weapons forged from builder technology, the absolute refusal to surrender, all of it together created a force that could hurt the devourers. For the first time in their existence, the monsters hesitated. The battle for the galaxy lasted 9 months. Every world became a fortress. Every civilian who could hold a weapon was trained to use it. Species that had been enemies fought side by side, united against a threat that cared nothing for their ancient conflicts. Admiral Jinnah commanded the defense from the eternal dawn, sleeping 2 hours a night, eating meals at her tactical station, aging 10 years in less than 1. She lost friends daily. She signed death warrants for commanders who had known her since childhood. She watched entire species vanish from existence. But she never wavered, and because she did not waver, neither did anyone else. The turning point came at the Battle of the Burning Nebula. A devourer swarm had gathered near the galactic core, drawn by the rich energy of dense star clusters. If they fed there, they would grow strong enough to overwhelm any defense. The coalition threw everything it had at stopping them. 50,000 ships, human and alien, faced a darkness that seemed to stretch forever. The battle lasted 3 weeks. On the final day, when victory seemed impossible, Captain Shin volunteered for a mission that everyone knew was suicide. She was young, only 32, with a husband waiting at home, and a daughter she had held only once before deployment. She commanded a strike force of 50 ships, each one carrying a piece of recovered builder technology, a weapon designed to collapse the dimensional anchors the devourers used to exist in normal space. No one knew if it would work. No one had ever tested it. The only certainty was that the ships delivering it would not survive the attempt. Addressed her crews over a private channel. Her voice was steady, almost warm. "We are going to do something today that matters," she said. "When we joined this fight, we knew we might not come home. We accepted that. Not because we wanted to die, but because some things are worth dying for." She paused, looking at the sensor display showing the heart of the devourer swarm. "Our ancestors were cast into the void to die. They survived because they refused to accept defeat. Today, we carry that same spirit. Today, we show the universe that humanity does not break. We do not surrender. We do not go quietly." She took a breath. "Tell them we remembered. Tell them we came home. The strike force dove into the heart of the swarm. For 7 minutes, 50 ships fought their way through a darkness that consumed stars. One by one they fell. Captain Lee, who had served with since the academy, Commander Bay, who had 3 children waiting on the eternal dawn, Lieutenant O, who had just turned 24, watched her friends die and kept flying. When she reached the center of the swarm, only her ship remained. She activated the weapon. The detonation was visible across half the galaxy. A pulse of energy that existed somewhere between light and darkness ripped through the devourer swarm, tearing apart the dimensional anchors that held them together. Millions of tons of consuming darkness simply ceased to exist. The surviving devourers fled. They ran back toward the void, wounded in ways they had not been wounded since before the elder species evolved. They were not destroyed. Perhaps they could never be truly destroyed. But they were hurt, and they were afraid, and for the first time in millions of years, they retreated. The war was over. The galaxy counted its dead for months. Billions had perished. Dozens of species had been reduced to endangered remnants. Entire civilizations would need centuries to rebuild. The cost of survival was almost too horrible to comprehend. But they had survived. Admiral Jinnah, now Supreme Commander of the Coalition, stood before the memorial built at the galactic core. The structure was massive, inscribed with the names of every ship lost in the Shadow War. Among them, in a place of honor, were listed the 47 vessels that had carried humanity into exile 300 years before. Representatives from every surviving species had gathered for the ceremony. Humans stood alongside dozens of younger species who had discovered their courage in the darkest hour. Looked at the memorial for a long moment before speaking. "We were banished because you feared our potential," she said, her words carried to every corner of known space by broadcast relays. "We returned because potential, like hope, cannot be killed. It can only be transformed." She looked up at the stars that surrounded them, stars that had once been forbidden to her people. "This is our message to the universe. Humanity endures. Humanity adapts. Humanity rises. Cast us into darkness and we will learn to see. Send us into the void and we will make it ours. Try to break us and we will become unbreakable." Her voice softened, carrying something that was almost mercy. "We do not forget what was done to us, but we choose not to be defined by it. We choose to be defined by what we became. Not exiles but explorers. Not victims but victors. Not the banished but the returned." She paused, looking at the assembled representatives of every species that had stood with humanity against the darkness. "And we choose to stand together, not because we have forgotten old wounds, but because we have learned that no species survives alone. The void taught us that. The devourers proved it. We are stronger together than we ever were apart." The fleet hung in space around the memorial, 10,000 human warships, surrounded by millions of coalition vessels. They had gone into the darkness as exiles. They had returned as liberators. Jinnah raised her hand in salute to the dead. "For those who did not live to see this day, for Park who led us into exile, for Sara who kept us alive, for Shin who died so that others might live, for every human who was born in the void, who lived in the void, who died in the void, we remember you, we honor you, and we will carry your spirit forward into whatever future awaits." She lowered her hand and turned to face the stars. "The devourers will return someday. Other threats will emerge from the darkness we do not yet know, but when they come, they will find us ready. They will find us united. They will find us waiting." A smile crossed her weathered face. "And they will learn what the conquered learned, what the void learned, what the devourers learned. Humanity does not die quietly. We fight, we survive, we overcome, and we never ever forget." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, billions watched in silence. And somewhere in the void between stars, In the darkness that had forged humanity into something new, the echo of Admiral Park's ancient promise finally faded into peace. They had returned. They had kept their word. And the galaxy would never be the same.